I just want to say thank you very much to Ailish and Orla for organising the session this morning. And I'm going to talk about, is it normal to feel more afraid, angry or sad at the moment? And there's a couple of things that I'd like to kind of cover during the course of the 15 minutes. I just want to begin by thinking about our language choice as we describe the response of our community and our personal response to the COVID-19 situation. And whether there could be some unintended consequences to the type of language that we use and whether that's important or not. The main thing I want to concentrate on is that it's really important to pay attention to how we're feeling and for us to help children to pay attention to how they're feeling currently. But it's really important that we give them the message that their response to a really difficult situation is normal, that there isn't something wrong if they're feeling more sad or angry or more afraid. And then I'd like to kind of conclude by thinking about what are practical things that parents might consider trying with their children to help them with their response to what's going on. So I want to think about some kind of important emotion regulation skills that people could consider. And that's putting words in how you're feeling, learning how to turn your emotions up and down, and cultivating a compassionate response to ourselves and to other people. And compassion is a word that we see increasingly used in modern society. So I want to unpack a little bit, what does compassion mean? And if we're trying to cultivate a compassionate response in children, what are the kind of things that we might be trying to help them to do? We've seen some really different leadership styles and different language use by our political leaders over the course of the last 2 months, and it's been striking the differences. But they've all been pointed in the one direction, which is this really difficult situation that we're in, where we're trying to prevent people from dying from a disease that none of us have ever heard before 2 months ago. It's a remarkably serious situation that we're in. So understandably, everyone's kind of attention is heightened as a consequence. Are we being successful or not? How do we measure the outcome of that? Is it deaths per million of people in a population? Are we flattening the curve? These are really important kind of things that we're all collectively working towards. And the response of our community, I think, has just been remarkable. I think it's brought out the best in so many people who I suspect were pretty amazing to begin with, whether that's medical staff, nurses, doctors, other medical staff that support them, postmen, Gardaí, people who drive our buses, people who work in supermarkets, make deliveries, or teachers who double as teachers and delivery people. It's just been amazing, I think, to see. And I think how some of our commentators and politicians describe them is interesting to contrast. I see some people choose a very kind of militaristic kind of language to describe their behavior, that they're fighting an enemy, that we're all at war, these people are on the front line, we're under attack, they're killing the virus, they're doing battle, and they've been redeployed. Whereas I think it may be more accurate to say, well, these aren't soldiers, these are regular people, very professionally going about their job, they're serving the public, they're being scientific, they're practicing medicine, bravely doing their job. Volunteering, supporting our community, and they've been reassigned rather than redeployed. So I think this kind of language for me respects the dignity of what these people are doing more than a militaristic type of language. So I think we should have some caution about how we describe what they're doing. And I think another message, which is a really important message that we need to be a little bit careful of our language, is this very important message that we need to mind our mental health during COVID-19. And we see this very helpfully, prominently displayed in our health service and through our media, that we need to mind our mental health. The aspect of this that I think we need to be cautious about is, what's the message that we give to people if we identify that someone is struggling in responding to COVID-19? So if I would like to mind my mental health during the COVID-19 situation, but I notice that I am more anxious, that I'm more sad, that I'm angrier, that I'm drinking more, that I'm sleeping more, that I'm drinking less, that I'm more irritable, I'm more traumatized, does that mean that there's something wrong with me? Do I now have a mental health problem or a mental illness? Or should I really be thinking of this in terms of that something really important is happening to me? I need to pay attention to what I'm doing and how I'm responding and what I'm feeling, but I have a big normal emotional response to a very big stressful event. So I think we need to be just a little bit careful of our language here when we give that message about mental health. Our response is a normal one. And our emotions aren't a mental health issue. Our emotions are normal, they're functional. So each of our emotions has a very important distinct purpose. So for example, the purpose of anxiety is to warn us that we're in danger and that we need to act to protect ourselves. The purpose of sadness is to draw our attention to the important things that we've lost, to allow us to grieve those things, to process that loss. And it signifies to us who or what is important to us. The purpose of anger normally is to defend ourselves, to maybe punish or respond to unfairness and injustice. So we do need to pay attention to these emotions because they're telling us something important about the situation that we're in, and they're uniquely telling us that. Another aspect of emotions is that they have a shared function. Their function is to rapidly direct our behavior towards a response and to communicate to others our mental state. Emotions are an incredible way to communicate to others. I'm sure people have had the experience of walking into a room and picking up a vibe in a room. No one has said anything, but you pick up the emotional tone that something has happened in that room. So these are really powerful situations. They tell us something very important about ourselves. And they've evolved to do that. So we're in a really threatening environment like we're in now, where COVID-19 is a big dangerous thing that's happening to me, my family, my friends, my community. Some aspects of my brain are evolved to respond to that threat emotionally so that my body responds to protect me from that threat. This is a really important function of our emotions that they're normally meant to do. But we're in a situation that's very different currently. We're in a situation where people are dying, where we are collectively trying to protect our community. So our emotions are going to be enhanced because of that. They're going to be heightened. So it's very important that we pay attention to that heightened message that they give us, that we understand that, and we learn how to regulate and process those heightened emotional states that we're in. And this is one of the difficulties with our emotions. Our emotions are evolved for a short-term response to a threatening environment. They don't work quite so well when we're in a prolonged situation of threat, like the one that we're currently in. And that's where things will become a little bit more problematic, and we may need to mind our emotional state consequently. So this is one of the important points that I'd like to try and make. Minding my mental health requires me to use other parts of my brain to regulate my emotions at these types of heightened emotion. So there isn't something wrong with you if you're feeling more anxious, worried, or afraid something important has happened to you. I kind of think it's kind of like we've been driving a normal road car for most of our lives, and suddenly now we're in a situation where our emotions have turned themselves into a highly tuned Formula One car, and we need to learn to drive that a little bit differently in order to drive it safely. And I think that's the kind of situation that we're in currently. So how might we do that, and how might we help children to do that? And there's three things that I just kind of like to kind of mention that might be helpful in that regard, that we can teach children how to do, or even practice for ourselves. The first one is to put words on how you're feeling. The second is learning how to turn your emotions up and down. And the third is to cultivate a compassionate response to the situation that we're in. So the first one of these skills, very simple skills, is how to put words on how I'm feeling. A skill that I usually use clinically when I'm working with young people and we're thinking about their emotions or helping them make sense of their emotions is this skill which is called using I statements to express your feelings. And an I statement has three parts to it. It starts by letting people know whose feeling we're talking about. So we just say, I feel. The second part of an I statement is you help the young person to clearly label what that feeling is. So I feel happy, I feel sad, angry, frustrated, lonely, whatever that may be. And the third part of an I statement is that we try and explain to ourselves and other people why we're feeling that way. So I feel sad when I can't call to see my friends because I miss them. Okay, so we help children to use that structure of talking about their emotional states. Children and adults feel a huge range of emotions through the course of any regular day, and particularly at the moment, I'm sure we're feeling lots of these in a heightened sense. So we can look out for those opportunities that naturally arise in a child's life during the course of their day, when we notice that they're feeling a certain way, and encourage them to put words on what it is that they're feeling. So we can kind of use that I statement structure and help a child put words on their feelings. So that's a natural opportunity that arises for us to do that. If you're like me and you're working maybe in a clinical setting with children, you tend to be doing this retrospectively. So again, we could consider doing that at the end of the day or after an event has passed. I tend to use worksheets that look something like this. We'll think of a particular emotion and we'll name what that emotion is, and then the young person will encourage them to think about a time when they've experienced that emotion. They can tell me about it, they could draw a picture, they could write a story about it. And then we'll think about how intensely did they feel that emotion on a scale of 0 to 10. Then we'll think about physically, where did they notice that emotion in their body? And then we put that all together and we use an I statement to express how they felt in that situation. So I felt afraid because I heard something in the news about people dying. So we can kind of retrospectively do this with children as well, if we think it'll help them to make sense of what they're experiencing. An understandable fear that sometimes parents and adults have is, will I make things worse if I draw my child's attention to what they're feeling? Wouldn't it be better if we just kind of left well enough alone and let them get on with it and they'll sort it out by themselves? The evidence seems to suggest the opposite, that actually if we ignore children's feelings, we actually turn them up and we heighten their emotional state rather than turning them down. Whereas if we draw attention to what it is that children are feeling and we validate them and we put words on what it is that they're feeling, that we help a child to regulate what they're feeling. So it's good to pay attention to how children are feeling. We're in a unique situation currently with the coronavirus. There are lots of really nice resources out there on the internet. Alan Carr, who's a professor of clinical psychology at UCD, sent me this morning, and it's a book about explaining the coronavirus to children, and it's illustrated by Alex Scheffler, who's the person who illustrated the Gruffalo books. So this is a nice resource that parents can download for free and use with children as they talk to them about what's happened, and maybe use that as an opportunity to talk to children about how they're feeling. So that's the first simple skill. The second one that I'd like to think about is turning our emotions up and down. And so when we're feeling, we have an emotional response to something that's normal, that's good, but if we're experiencing that emotion over a prolonged period of time and we want to mind that emotion, it may be helpful for us to learn how to turn that up and down. So some emotions like anger or fear, we might want to learn how to turn down. And there are evidence-based ways that we can teach children simple skills to help them with this. Two that have a huge amount of evidence behind them are teaching children how to use simple breathing techniques to regulate themselves, and to use a relaxation called progressive muscular relaxation. So on the screen here, there's an app that's available for free on the iTunes and Google Play stores called Mindful Naps, and it has breathing exercises and progressive muscular relaxation and other mindfulness exercises there. So I tend to use that with children, and you can see from what's the illustration here on the screen, the breathing exercise, for example, is really simple. It's simply, we look at this little creature on the screen and we follow the pace of his breathing, and children can play around with different paces for children as they find the pace that works helpfully for them to regulate their fear and their anger, so they can kind of turn those feelings down. And muscular relaxation is simply you tense your muscles working right through your body, and then you let them go, and you notice that change from tension to relaxation. There's also a website, if you don't want to use an app on a phone or an iPad, that you can use with children, which is all called mindfulness.com, which has those exercises on it as well. And I was just so impressed when I saw this on OTE's Homeschool Hub. This is a teacher teaching children how to do progressive muscular relaxation as part of their school curriculum. So that's available for all of us to go kind of and watch on the OTE player. So I think fair play to OTE for that. So these are simple tools that we can use. Sometimes we might want to help a child learn how to turn their emotions up. So if someone is feeling sad for a prolonged period of time, we might want to help them to notice and to turn up their positive emotions. And the evidence-based approach to this is called behavioral activation, where we help a child to think through, what are the things that I'm doing less of now because I'm feeling sad and unmotivated, and which of those would I like to begin to increasingly do and experience some increase in positive emotion as a consequence. So I tend to use worksheets that look like this. It's important to start with what's going to motivate the person to engage in this kind of exercise. So I would talk to you, person, about what kind of person would you like to be? What kind of family member would you like to be? What kind of friend would you like to be? What are the things that give you pleasure in being that kind of person? And what are the things that give you a sense of achievement as you are that kind of a person? So we get them to make a list of the things they enjoy doing and the things that are helpful to do as they become that kind of person. And then they pick which one would they like to do, and they measure how well they get on with that, thinking about how much pleasure do I get from that, how much sense of mastery do I get from that. And they use that to learn for themselves, what is the pace of change to increase my positive emotions that I can experience in doing that. So the child is always in control of what they're doing and learning from their own experience of that. So finally, just to mention cultivating a compassionate response. And this use of compassion has become increasingly popular in modern parlance. And a lot of it stems from this work of Professor Paul Gilbert in the UK, who defines compassion in a form of therapy called compassion focused therapy, is sensitivity to suffering of self and others with a commitment to try to relieve it and prevent it. So if we're being compassionate, we require having a sensitivity to other people in our lives and our own emotional distress, and some wisdom in how we respond to that, courage and strength within that response, and we need to be practiced and dedicated in our use of compassion. That alarm is telling me my 15 minutes are up. I'm sorry I don't have a little bit more time to unpackage this, but hopefully that gives you an introduction. That it's a longer arc in terms of developing a compassionate response that requires some careful thought and some practice. So I'm going to stop there, if that's okay.